As dawn broke over Lagos, the city's usual hustle and bustle had already begun. But for Amara, Chinedu, and Ngozi, the day was filled with anxiety and the weight of impending danger. The three of them sat in Ngozi's small living room, the tension in the air so thick it was almost palpable. "We need to move quickly," Chinedu said, breaking the silence. "I've arranged for a safe house outside the city. We'll be there by tonight, and from there we can figure out the next steps." Amara nodded, though her mind was a swirl of uncertainty. She had never imagined her life would take such a drastic turn. All she had ever wanted was to live in peace, to care for her grandmother, and to find happiness. Now she was running for her life, caught up in a world of crime and deceit. Ngozi, ever the pragmatist, spoke up. "We can't just leave without a plan. Chinedu, you said Chuka Romanus is after you. What's stopping him from following us to the safe house?" Chinedu's face was grim. "I've already taken care of that. Chuka and I reached an agreement last night. He won't be coming after us, at least not for now." "What kind of agreement?" Amara asked, her suspicion growing. "I promised him a share of my business. It's not ideal, but it buys us time," Chinedu explained, avoiding her gaze. Amara's stomach churned. Even in their most desperate hour, Chinedu was still making deals, still playing the game. But what choice did they have? This was the only way to survive. The sound of a car engine outside snapped them out of their thoughts. Chinedu peered through the curtains and saw a black SUV idling by the curb. "It's time," he said, his voice tense. "Let's go." They quickly gathered their belongings and Chinedu led them out of the apartment. As they made their way to the SUV, Amara couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in the pit of her stomach. Everything felt wrong, like they were walking into a trap. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, Amara turned to Ngozi. "Are you sure you want to come with us? You could stay here, keep living your life." Ngozi shook her head. "I'm not leaving you, Amara. We're in this together." Chinedu glanced at them through the rearview mirror. "We'll be safe once we get to the safe house. Just hang on." But Amara wasn't convinced. She could feel the danger closing in on them. Like a predator stalking its prey, the journey to the safe house was long and uneventful, but the tension in the car remained. When they finally arrived, Chinedu parked the SUV in a secluded spot and led them to a small nondescript house nestled in the woods. "This is it," he said, unlocking the door. "We'll be safe here." Amara and Ngozi exchanged a wary glance before following him inside. The interior of the house was sparse but functional, with basic furniture and minimal decorations. It was clear that this place was meant to be a temporary refuge, not a home. As they settled in, Chinedu began to make phone calls, checking in with his contacts and ensuring their safety. Amara sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the dense forests that surrounded them. It was eerily quiet, the only sound being the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Ngozi joined her, sitting beside her on the bed. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know," Amara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like everything is slipping away from me. I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're still Amara," Ngozi said gently. "You're strong and you're going to get through this." Amara nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed it. She had been through so much already, but this was something entirely different. This was a fight for survival, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to keep going. As the sun began to set, Chinedu finished his phone calls and joined them in the living room. "We should be safe here for the night," he said, though there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. But before they could respond, there was a loud bang on the door. The three of them froze, their hearts racing. Chinedu motioned for them to stay quiet as he moved towards the door, gun in hand. Another bang, followed by a familiar voice. "Chinedu, open up. It's me, Chioma." Chinedu's expression darkened as he unlocked the door, revealing Chioma standing on the doorstep, flanked by two men. Her smile was one of triumph, her eyes glinting with malice. "What are you doing here, Chioma?" Chinedu demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Oh, Chinedu, you didn't really think you could run away from me, did you?" Chioma purred, stepping inside. "I know all your secrets, remember? And now it's time to settle the score." Ngozi moved to stand beside Amara, her eyes wide with fear. "What do you want, Chioma?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I want what's mine," Chioma replied, her smile widening. "Chinedu was supposed to be mine, and I'm not letting him go without a fight." Chinedu stepped in front of Amara and Ngozi, his stance protective. "Chioma, this isn't the time. You need to leave now." But Chioma shook her head, her expression turning cold. "I'm not leaving, Chinedu. Not until I get what I want." The men behind her stepped forward, their intentions clear. Chinedu tightened his grip on his gun, ready to defend Amara and Ngozi with his life if necessary. But before anyone could make a move, the sound of approaching vehicles filled the air. Everyone froze, listening as the engines grew louder, closer. "It's them," Chinedu muttered, his heart sinking. "Chuka's men, they found us." Amara's blood ran cold as the reality of their situation set in. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and there was no way out. Chioma's eyes narrowed as she realized the gravity of the situation. "What have you done, Chinedu?" she hissed. "You've led them right to us." Chinedu didn't have time to respond. The front door burst open and Chuka Romano strode in, flanked by a dozen armed men. His eyes locked onto Chinedu, a sneer curling his lips. "Well, well, well," Chuka said, his voice dripping with contempt. "I knew you'd try to run, Emeka, but you can't escape your fate." Chinedu moved to shield Amara and Kozi, his heart pounding in his chest. "Chuka, this doesn't have to end in bloodshed. We can work something out." But Chuka's sneer only deepened. "It's too late for that. You made your choice, Emeka, and now you'll pay the price." The tension in the room was unbearable as the two men faced off, the threat of violence hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Amara clung to Ngozi, her mind racing for a way out, but there was no escape, no hope of surviving this nightmare. All she could do was pray that somehow they would make it through the night. As Chuka raised his gun, the room erupted into chaos. Chinedu lunged forward, tackling Chuka to the ground as gunshots rang out. Amara screamed, ducking for cover as the room descended into a violent melee. Ngozi grabbed Amara's hand, pulling her towards the back door in a desperate bid for freedom. But their escape was cut off by one of Chuka's men, who grabbed Ngozi and threw her to the ground. Amara watched in horror as Ngozi fought back, her screams echoing through the room. But she was no match for the armed men, and within moments she was subdued, her cries silenced. Amara felt a surge of fury and despair as she watched her best friend fall. This was it, the end of everything she had known, everything she had fought to protect. But just as all hope seemed lost, a shot rang out, silencing the chaos. Amara turned to see Chuka lying on the ground, his eyes wide in shock as blood pooled around him. Chinedu stood over him, his gun still smoking. His eyes were wild, filled with a mixture of rage and desperation. "Amara," he said, his voice breaking, "we need to go, now." But Amara couldn't move. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the scene before her, the destruction, the death, the shattered remnants of her life. "Amara!" Chinedu shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her towards the door. "We don't have time!" Amara stumbled after him, her mind numb with shock. Behind them, the sounds of the fight continued, but all she could focus on was the weight of what had just happened. They burst through the back door and into the night, the cool air hitting them like a slap to the face. Chinedu didn't stop running, pulling Amara along as they fled into the darkness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the edge of the woods. Chinedu stopped, breathing heavily as he turned to face Amara. "We are not safe yet," he said, his voice ragged. "But we will be. I promise you, Amara, I'll keep you safe." But Amara shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, Chinedu, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep running. I can't keep living in fear. I'm done." Chinedu's heart broke as he saw the resolve in her eyes. He knew then that he had lost her, that no matter what he did, no matter how hard he tried, he could never undo the damage he had caused. "Amara," he began, but she cut him off. "Goodbye, Chinedu," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, but I can't stay." And with that, she turned and walked away from him, disappearing into the darkness of the forest. Chinedu watched her go, his heart shattering into a million pieces. He wanted to run after her, to beg her to stay, but he knew it was too late. He had lost her. His lies, his secrets, and his life of crime had driven her away for good. Chinedu stood there for a long time, staring into the night where Amara had vanished. He felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him, the reality of his life crashing down like a wave. He had built his empire on lies, manipulation, and violence, and now it had all come crumbling down. He was alone. Back in the house, the chaos had subsided. Chuka Romanus lay dead on the floor, his men either dead or fleeing into the night. Koma, who had been the catalyst for much of the evening's events, sat on the floor, shock written all over her face. The consequences of her actions had come to fruition in a way she hadn't anticipated. She had lost everything she had schemed for, and now she too was alone. Ngozi, who had been knocked unconscious during the struggle, slowly came to. The sight of the destruction around her brought tears to her eyes. She had tried to stand by Amara, to protect her, but in the end, they had all been consumed by the dark world Chinedu had dragged them into. As the sun began to rise over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Chinedu finally turned away from the forest. There was nothing left for him here. The empire he had built was gone. The woman he loved had left, and the man he had become could no longer survive in the light of day. With a heavy heart, Chinedu walked away from the house, from the bodies, from the life he had known. He didn't know where he was going or what he would do next, but he knew one thing: he would never be the same again. Months passed since that fateful night, and life in Lagos moved on. The city continued to pulse with energy, but for Amara, everything had changed. She had returned to her grandmother's side, determined to rebuild her life from the ashes of her past. The lessons she had learned were hard and painful, but they had made her stronger, more resilient. Chinedu, now just Emeka, having shed the alias that had brought him so much pain, had left Lagos behind. He wandered from town to town, searching for a way to atone for his sins, to find some semblance of peace. He knew he could never undo the harm he had caused, but he hoped that in time he could find a way to make amends. Ngozi had stayed by Amara's side, helping her navigate the difficult path of healing. Their bond, forged in the fires of adversity, had only grown stronger. They knew that the scars of the past would never fully fade, but together they would find a way to move forward. As for Kyoma, she had disappeared into the shadows, her fate uncertain. She had learned the hard way that manipulation and greed only led to destruction. What became of her, no one knew, but perhaps she too was searching for a way to start anew. In the end, the story of Amara, Chinedu, and the others was a cautionary tale, a reminder that the choices we make can lead us down paths we never intended to take. But even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for redemption, always a chance to choose a better path. And so, as the sun rose on a new day in Lagos, Amara stood by her grandmother's side, watching the city come to life. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that whatever it was, she was ready to face it, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Thank you for being a part of this journey with us. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up, share it with others, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales. Remember, life is a series of choices. Make them wisely and never lose sight of the hope that guides us through the darkest times. Until next time, stay inspired and keep the stories alive.